Okay, what we want to do in this video is give kind of an intro, an explanation, and an example of the way that a consumer spends his or her limited income in order to get the most total satisfaction from their limited income, from their purchases. Okay, now the name that we give to this way of spending their limited income is called the law of equi-marginal returns, or the equi-marginal principle. Okay, so the first thing, in order to explain this, we're just going to have a quick recap of a few of the definitions. So the first thing is, what is utility? Well, utility refers to the satisfaction, the happiness, the contentment that a consumer gets from consuming a good or service. And in economics, we've made up this imaginary unit of measurement called utils. So what we are claiming is that we can absolutely accurately measure how much happiness each good or service that a consumer consumes, how much happiness they get from each good or service. Now, we can't, obviously we can't, it's impossible, but the idea is it's a theoretical framework. Now, the next thing is, what is total utility? Well, total utility refers to the entire satisfaction that a consumer receives from consuming all the goods and services in an hour, day, week, month, year, etc. Okay, so when you add up all of the marginal utilities that you got from consuming each good or service in a particular time period, that's total utility, which is just total happiness, total satisfaction. So I suppose we've already mentioned marginal utility, so I better define it. Okay, so marginal utility is the extra satisfaction that a consumer gets from consuming one more unit of a good. Okay, so it's the extra happiness that a consumer gets. And in this case, we're going to talk about the Big Macs, and then we're going to joke about my Big Mac consumption in one sitting. Well, the first thing I want you to see is that for the vast majority of them, total utility is rising. Okay, and then eventually it'll fall. But what I want you to see here is that marginal utility is falling. The extra happiness that I get from consuming one more Big Mac in one sitting, and we have an assumption that no time has passed, is falling. And that is the law of diminishing marginal utility that we've talked about in a previous video. If you're not sure, just go back, okay, and then have a look at that and then come back to this. So what you see here, first of all, how do we calculate marginal utility? Well, it's the total utility of this good minus the total utility before it. So 10 minus 0 is 10, 15 minus 10 is 5, and the reason is because this represents the total happiness that I got from consuming 2 Big Macs. But if we see the change, which marginal utility is, marginal essentially means change or the extra, but they're the same thing. And we see the change in total utility went from 10 to 15, so that's 5 extra utils of happiness. 2 kind of extra, potentially, well, not irrelevant, but not necessarily important to the IB course, is that, see the way we have marginal utility of 0. So supposedly what we're saying here for the 5th good is that I would be indifferent between eating it or not at a price of 0. I certainly wouldn't be willing to pay any money for it because I wouldn't get any happiness. Okay, so that'd be ridiculous, because I'd be giving up some of my limited income to get no happiness back. So I wouldn't be willing to do that. But at a price of 0, I would be willing or indifferent to eat the 5th Big Mac. And then see this here, a marginal utility of minus 3. That means that I would be suffering disutility. My total utility would be going down from 18 to 15. So therefore you would have to pay me in order to incentivize me to do that. Okay, so when the marginal utility of anything is less than 0, you'd have to be paid to do something. And when it's equals 0, you are indifferent about consuming it at a price of 0. You wouldn't be willing to pay any money for it, but you would be indifferent whether or not you ate it, or whether or not, in this case, I ate it at a price of 0. Okay, now what we have done is we've made a number of assumptions regarding the consumer. One of these assumptions is that consumers seek to maximize their utility from their given limited income, and that is 100% true. And as we've already said, okay, in economics there's a condition, there's a mathematical equation that consumers have to satisfy in order to maximize their total utility from their income. So we're trying to get them to maximize their total utility. That's what they want. We don't have to get anybody to do anything. That's what they want to do, is maximize their total utility from their limited income. But it's called the law of equi-marginal returns, the equi-marginal principle. So we're trying to maximize total utility, but the way they do that randomly enough is they spend their money, and we're concerned with marginal utility. So just give me 1 second to read this out, and then we'll talk about this equation. A rational consumer, a consumer that takes actions consistent with their preferences, has limited income, is subject to the law of diminishing marginal utility, and wants to maximize utility or happiness, will spend his or her income in such a way that the ratio of marginal utility to price is the same for all goods consumed. In this way, they maximize total utility. So what we're saying is, in order to get the most possible total happiness from consuming goods and services, a consumer will spend their money in this way. And what that means is that the ratio of marginal utility to price, don't forget what marginal utility is the extra satisfaction you got from consuming one more good, or the last good if you want, divided by the price of that good, equals to the marginal utility of a different good divided by the price of that other good. So what we're saying is, if you spend your money in such a way where the ratios of marginal utility to price is the same for all goods consumed, you will end up maximizing your total utility. And what I mean by all goods consumed, I mean, like, let's say, you might consume 50 goods in a year, so I don't know, it's irrelevant, but just for every single good, the way to get the most total happiness is to spend your money in this way. And a consumer said to be in equilibrium, or is maximizing his or her utility, when he or she spends all their income in such a way that these ratios, this divided by that, for the first good, let's say this is Big Macs, equals this divided by that. Let's say good 2 is drinks of Coke, equals the marginal utility of French fries divided by the price of French fries. Okay, so that's what we're saying, that they will maximize their utility spending their money in this way. Now that's the end of this video. I'm sure you don't really understand exactly what's going on, but just keep that in mind, that this here is the way they're going to spend money, and in the next video we're going to do a few more examples.